Now in this video, I'm putting airbrush in the sign. After that, I'm also going to put a drop shadow and outline it and put a border around the sign. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. If you don't have an airbrush and a compressor and all this stuff that goes with it, just leave it out. I'll give you some tips for putting some snazzy stuff in the letters later. It's really important that you work in a well-ventilated area. Outside even would be ideal, or in the garage with a fan going. Wear a respirator so that you don't breathe this stuff. Do not do this in your grandmother's kitchen. It's important. You get paint all over everything and it's stinky. Especially when you're using one shot with thinners in it, it's toxic. So don't do that. When you paint these letters onto the sign, using the one shot, of course, that when it's soaking wet and you go to airbrush over it, that soaking wet, it'll drink up some of the airbrush. It's pretty bad. So one of the things you have to do is let it sit and harden up a little bit, anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. If you wait until it's completely cured, the airbrush won't stick to it. It just doesn't stick very well, and later on, if the sign gets roughed up, it's going to break up or smear that airbrush. So you want it in a really good spot to receive the airbrush so that the airbrush bonds with the letter. In this case, I didn't do that. I painted this like 3 days ago, but I don't care. We're going to put airbrush in this, and airbrush is kind of spray-y. So there's a couple ways you can do it. If you work really good with your airbrush, and I'll show you the strokes that we're going to need, you can just gently throw some airbrush fades in those letters and it'll look great. But if you're new or don't want to make that mess, and you got to realize too, the wet airbrush will wipe off of there. It'll wipe clean. This is getting an outline and a good sized drop shadow. So I'm not worried about a little bit. But just to help the sign go a little smoother, I'm going to put a mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this same piece of paper that I used for the white Stabilo pencil, because it's a perfect mask. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out real close to this letter, but any mask on something like this will really be helpful. I'm not really worried about it being super close to it, but if I was, I would mask up really high like this. I'm just going to put some airbrush in it and wipe off some of the, with the rag, I'm going to wipe off some of the extra just to get close, but this makes for a much cleaner setup. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I got my mineral spirits. I want to mix it in there, but I need to drop little teeny bits in at a time. So I'm going to put just a little bit. I just filled it up to there with the thinner. I'm going to point that, and I'll put just a couple of drops. I already spilled it on my floor. What a weenie. Couple drops, and spin that up. I've got a pretty good idea of how thin it should be. It's about the same viscosity as milk, but you still want it to have a little bit of bite. I'm going to put a little more thinner in it. Just a drop. I'm making a mess. What I did is I take a little on that screwdriver and set it right there, and it runs down kind of slow. That should be it. But all masked off, or as much as I care to. I could finish masking the rest of the stuff. I don't care. I'm using a Pesce VL1. This thing is a workhorse. It's perfect for signs. I've already spent some time with Sean and Gus over there in Hawaii, showing them how to operate this airbrush on a shirt or on material. On material, I run this at 60 pounds of air pressure. On a sign like this, I'm going to run it at 20 and make sure this paint's thinned down pretty good, like you saw me do. I'm going to put a little bit of paint in the cup. I'm going to test it here on some paper. It's a little thick because usually when you blast it, it would run if it was too thin. But you know what? It looks good. It's making a soft fade. So I'm going to leave it this thick. I like how thick it is now that I've tested it. On these letters, I'm going to be doing a stroke that looks like this. It's dark on the bottom and softer on top. So I'm practicing over here so it fades going up. I'm just practicing this stroke, not too close or it'll blotch up, kind of poopy. Stay back a little bit, but stay inside the letter. The A will look like this. Once I get the paint in it, just run some airbrush. It's okay if it's soft. I'm going to make sure I tip the airbrush up a little bit so that any overspray stays in that direction. And I'm just going to do a little test right here. And gently. Be a little darker at the bottom of the letter. Oh yeah, that's a really pretty fade and it softens out right there at the top. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in a little bit at the bottom so it looks even. Just a little bit on this crossbar here. Trying to get that even. I had to go kind of dark there. It's getting a little too thick. I don't want to load up too much paint at once. Now that I think about it, it's best that you practice on something else first before you screw up your ALOHA sign. Well, that worked really clean. I just want to put a little over there. It looks a little light. I ran a little too high up on that O. So I'm going to kind of put a little more on the L just to make it look like it belongs. There, that helps. You could put 2 or 3 different colors into letters. Like on some hot red letters, you do red to orange to yellow. But this is our first sign. We're going to make it awesome without overdoing too much and learning a bunch of stuff. Just now I sprayed and I could see the paint move on the letter. I got to be careful. I'm putting it on a little too thick, getting a little too excited. Looks good though. What I always do at the end of this is you kind of stand back and you take a look at it and see what it's missing. I don't know, it seems like it has some color in there. Oh, I forgot this thing on the H. So let's add a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. Tiny bits. I'm barely pulling back on that. Little teeny bits. And that looks good. And we got a little bit of paint left in our airbrush. Now would be the perfect time to do some practicing on paper, or that paper's pretty forgiving. Practice a larger fade that's done in strips like this. Like if you were painting on a larger letter, or make your own letters with an outline on the airbrush, and put a fade in that. And of course, this is just one way to add airbrush into something. There are many things that you can do, but we're just getting started, so we're going to put just this little bit in. Brush. Now I got it all over my finger, which will give me actually a stink finger. I'm running those bubbles backwards so it's the paint's mixing with the thinner. Pour that out. Got the airbrush done, got it all cleaned up and put away. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. That overspray, there's still overspray. So while it's still good and wet, I'm not going to touch that letter. If I do, I ruin it and hate life. But I'm just wiping the And I know that this letter gets a good bold outline, so I'm kind of not worried about it. I just want to make sure that I'm not getting too close. So I just want to wipe that up, make it pretty. Again, making it pretty. There. The overspray is not so bad up here. One of the things I've always done as a lettering is I'll tighten a rag or paper towel around that, and I'll touch it to my head. And just that little bit of oils that's on your forehead is excellent for cleaning up paint. Just excellent. And I'm kind of just going around making sure that it's going to be pretty. And there. Now we let that sit. We let that sit for a whole day. Geez, maybe two. Now I could go back and just start outlining and doing it, but I don't want to mess with it, and you guys don't want to either. There is certainly a lot of ways you can put a drop shadow on a word. And using different colors makes a difference. We'll go into that some other time. I'm just going to throw a quick drop shadow on this guy. You can watch. Normally I like having the light going in one direction on this sign. Just because of the way it's tipped forward like that, I'm going to put the drop shadow going down at like 45 degrees down another direction. I'll show you when we're doing that. But the paint strokes are the same. It's the same as setting it in there, flattening it down, and cleaning it up. And the outline of the word's going to fix all of, well, anything you screw up next to the letter. Before we started painting this, I realized I told you to just get black, blue, and white. Pooh. I would have liked to put some purple in this as the drop shadow. But I didn't tell you to buy it, so I'll go ahead and use what I got. Working with what you got's a thing. So I'm going to kind of load this up with blue and just a little bit of black. Just maybe a whole squeezerino. So it's not completely black, because I want to put this drop shadow on here, but I don't want it completely black because I want to use black for the outline. What I came out with is a really poopy blue black mix that looks kind of flat. It's perfect! Okay, let's get started on this one, because it's going to start looking cool now. Don't be afraid to paint. Set your brush down and go. This poopy, what I'm doing is I'm just getting just close to the letter, but not touching it. And it looks a little poopy in between what I just painted and the letter. That's okay, because it's getting an outline. And try to keep the thickness pretty close to the same. And flatten that out just because it makes it pretty. Try to keep the thickness pretty much the same. So you can go like this, leave your brush flat. I'm going to have to apologize. I should really have set this up right. This airbrush is completely dry. I still don't want to paint into it. I just don't want to. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm just setting the tip of it in there. Go for it, press down, raise up, slide into that corner. Same here. Barely touching it, barely pressing down. Once you try this, you'll see exactly what it needs. But ideally, you want to get a nice, even coat. So it's pretty. Oh, went too far on that. Got excited, went a little too far. Cut it off like that. There like I said, there's a lot of different ways to put a drop shadow on something. This is a very simple type of drop shadow to put on here, but perfect for your first sign, right? There's these little bubble bumps in here. They're tiny. It's not a bump, it's like a hole that happens. And it means that there's just a little bit of oil, or there's a little bit of brush oil, or just even from my fingers on here, and it affects the paint. Usually, I can just go back over it, and it makes it go away. And 99 out of 100 times, that's all you really need for something like that. But when that gets out of control and it just won't stop doing that, that is where the smoothie comes in. Remember I said you need some smoothie? Comes in a little bottle, and all it takes is a couple drops. Couple drops of smoothie for your cup full of paint, and it'll make that problem go away. But like I said, most of the time you can just make it go away just by going back over it a little bit. And there's a little hair going over into my airbrush, and it's making me nervous. Looks like it fell in there when the airbrush was wet. I'm going to try to ignore that. Since most of y'all that are attempting this have a real good idea of art in the first place, and this isn't your actual first gig, you'll understand a little bit of drop shadow, how a drop shadow works. So it doesn't really matter what shape you're painting into. All of these brush strokes are the same. Start out thin, flatten out, twist the brush. I want to keep going flat up to there, raise up, spin it to get into that corner. That takes a little practice. You don't have to do it like that. You can do it in one stroke here, another one there, come to a stop, clean it up, and your sign will look as good as mine, even if I go up here and go this way. For this, I got to get down that long point, and I got to get there thin. So I'm going to barely set my brush in there sideways, go till it doesn't fit anymore, and raise up till just barely touching to a point. Ah! We'll have to fix that in post. Or come in from the center. The outline will fix that. Sometimes I just got to slow down and just be extra careful doing some of these pointy points. It doesn't take long to figure out how the brush works against the paint, and how that dragging it sideways will make it fuzzy, or not twisting it will cause a problem. But that's something that you have to teach yourself. And there it is, it's done. Now the drop shadow's on there. Let's get that outline on there. It's going to be awesome. And this is where we start doing the outline. I sped up the video for this because this video is taking kind of long. So as I'm doing the outline here, I want you to know that it's, of course, a smaller brush. I let the whole thing dry, but all the brush strokes are the same. It's simple. Okay, not simple. It's a little harder to do to work on the outline, but only a little. And this is what I was talking about, the outline being black and wanting to save it. I do want you to know that I kind of don't like this thing overall because of how it looks with these light blue letters on the red. Yeah, blue and red doesn't always go well together. And I knew that, but I had the red one was already ready to go for this sign, so I did it. If I had another choice, I would have made it a real light aqua, something pretty. This isn't bad. Yeah, I would have just preferred it a little bit nicer. To jazz this sign up, I might throw in some plumerias in with it, maybe a little tiki head or something just to jazz it up. But it looks really good, and it looks really good finished. Right there, I had a little spot. I took my rag and I wiped it up. It's easy to do, especially since you let these letters dry for a day or two so that they can, so that you can mess with them a little bit. You certainly don't want to get paint, the black paint, inside the airbrush because it'll stain it. And you won't be able to clean it off so good. These letters are not cleared. Even though I applied airbrush to the letters after they were days old, it stuck pretty good. It looks pretty good. It's like I ran a little test. I rubbed my finger on it. That airbrush stuck on there pretty good, so I'm really happy with that. I did little bumpy bumps in some of this paint. Still looks really good. Here's another thing. I told you to get a number 8 and a number 3. Right now we're outlining this with a number 3. This number 3 that I'm using right here is older. So it's a little thinned out. Your brand new number 3 might be a little tougher. Should have used a liner. Well, I wasn't going to have you buy a liner just for this, but they make liners where the hair on the brush is longer. Makes doing outlines easier and neater. But this number 3, the neat thing about it is you can get the outline on the letter, and then you can still use the number 3 on other smaller letters where you're going to need it more. So if you're planning to do a bunch of signs where you're going to be outlining it like this, yeah, we'll get you a line. We'll figure out which liner you need for it, and we'll get you that. Right there, I went on to that A a little bit, and I wiped it off with my finger. It stained it. I could have tried a little harder to get that off of there, but it wasn't so bad, so I just left it. Here I just took a ruler, set it on the edge, because I like the thickness of the ruler, drew a line, and I put that vinyl tape on here. That's one of the things you can use that tape for. And I put the paint down, a nice even coat along that paint line, or tape rather, and I just peeled it up and it made a flawlessly perfect line. I don't know, the border around these things, it's kind of easy for me to do. One of the things I do is I grab my finger and hold it along the very edge of the sign and just take the brush right there and just drag it along like almost like a pinstriping brush would be, just to grab the outline there. And then one of the things that I do is I round the corners. You could take a Dixie cup and just draw the little circle on there so they're all even. But what I discovered is if they're a little off, they look great. It's a personal thing that I prefer these rounded corners on my borders. I don't do it all the time, but I really like it. Yeah, this sign will look a lot better. So, I was going to do a pinstriping video just next, but I'm really excited about this airbrush painting I'm doing. My honey is working on one. It got me excited. So I've got a canvas put together and some artwork, and I'll videotape that and I'll get it off to you guys so that you can start doing this stuff. Once again, like, subscribe, ask questions, put pictures of your projects down below so that I can gawk at them and have a bunch of fun. Thanks a lot, guys. I had Kailani do some signs. They didn't come out that good. It looked like paw prints a lot, and all it said was "F***ing feed me." And so I'm not going to put her signs up. But next time she'll do something a little bit better, and then I'll post it so you can see it. See you guys later.